December came cold that year, the kind of cold that found every crack in the cabin walls, every weakness in the woman inside. I was 8 months heavy with child when they buried my husband. Shot in the back during a bank robbery. They said, wrong place, wrong time. That's what everyone told me, as if that made the grave less permanent. 3 weeks had passed since I'd watched them lower James into frozen ground. 3 weeks of waking up reaching for him. 3 weeks of cooking for 2 and eating for 1. 3 weeks of talking to an empty chair and getting no answers back. I talked to him still. To his chair by the fire. To the space beside me in bed that stayed cold no matter how many quilts I piled on. I told him about my swollen feet, the baby's kicks that kept me awake at night. Asked him how I was supposed to do this alone. He never answered. Dead men don't. The cabin felt bigger without him, colder. His tools still hung on the wall hammer. Saw. The leather work gloves he'd worn until the fingers split. His boots sat by the door, caked with dried mud from that last morning. I couldn't bring myself to move them. Couldn't bring myself to do a lot of things. I tried to keep up the place. I did. But chopping wood 8 months pregnant meant stopping every third swing to catch my breath. The fence James had been meaning to fix sagged worse each day. The roof leaked in the corner where he'd promised to replace shingles come spring. Spring wouldn't bring him back. The women in town brought casseroles sometimes. They'd knock soft, leave covered dishes on the porch, mumble condolences through the door. They never stayed. I didn't blame them. Grief made people uncomfortable. Pregnant grief even more so. They didn't know what to say to a woman carrying life while drowning in death. The men tipped their hats when they saw me, offered brief nods. Sorry for your loss. Mrs. Crawford. Then they'd move on. No one offered to chop my wood or fix my fence. That was husband work. And I didn't have a husband anymore. Old Mrs. Hennessy from the neighboring ranch had stopped by last week. She'd actually come inside, settled her wide frame in James's chair like she had every right. Shame about the cabin, she'd said, pouring herself coffee from my pot. What about it? I'd been washing dishes. My back ached. Everything ached. Just that James never got the deed filed proper. Built it on county land, people say. She'd sipped the coffee. Made a face. I'd forgotten to add sugar again. Of course, no one much cared while he was alive to work it. I hadn't understood then what she was trying to tell me. Hadn't wanted to understand. I'd just nodded. Waited for her to leave so I could sit in the silence again. The baby kicked hard against my ribs. I pressed my hand to the spot. Felt the push back. I know, I whispered. I know you're coming. I'm not ready. I counted days differently now. Not by calendar. By how many times I forgot James was dead. This morning, 3 times. I'd turned to tell him something about the broken fence. Reached for his coffee cup to fill it. Started to call his name when I heard a noise outside. 3 times I forgot. Yesterday, it had been 5. I was getting better at remembering, worse at living. Grief wasn't what I expected. It wasn't dramatic. It was dishes still needing washing, wood still needing chopping. A body that kept demanding I live when all I wanted was to stop. Not die. Just stop. Stop trying so hard. Stop pretending I'd survive this. Stop believing anything would ever feel right again. I didn't know then what I'd find on the mantle after he was gone. Didn't know the man I'd buried had secrets that would save me. I just knew I was alone. Winter was coming. And the baby inside me kicked like it was trying to remind me I couldn't give up yet. Labor started on a Tuesday. Snow falling so thick I couldn't see the barn from the window. I'd been heating water, preparing as best I could. When the first contraction doubled me over the table. The midwife lived 8 miles out. I had no horse anymore. We'd sold it month before James died when money got tight. I had no way to reach her. No neighbor close enough to hear me scream. No one was coming. So I did what frontier women have always done. I endured. I lit every candle I owned. The cabin filled with flickering light that made shadows dance on the walls like witnesses. I talked to James through every contraction, told him he was a coward for leaving me to do this alone. Then I apologized. Then I cursed him again. Labor makes you honest. The pain came in waves. Between them, I could breathe, could think, could wonder if I'd survive this. Women died in childbirth all the time, especially alone, especially in winter. The baby could die too. Then I'd have nothing, just a cabin full of ghosts and empty chairs. "Don't you dare," I said out loud, to the baby, to God, to James, wherever he was. "Don't you dare take this too." Hours passed. The candles burned lower. The contractions grew closer. I'd read about this in a book once. Back when I was young and stupid and thought reading about something meant understanding it. The book hadn't mentioned the fear, the loneliness, the way your voice becomes the only sound in the world, and you wonder if you're already dead. I thought about my mother. She died when I was 12. Fever took her quick. I used to think that was cruel. Now I wondered if quick wasn't mercy. This was slow. This was knowing every moment that you might not see the next one. The baby crowned just before dawn. I felt the shift, the pressure, the impossible stretch of it. Reached down and felt a head. "Come on," I whispered. "Come on, little one. We can do this. We have to do this." One more push, then another, then a rush and a slide, and suddenly there was a baby on the blankets between my legs. Not crying, not moving, just lying there blue and still. "No," I grabbed him, cleared his mouth with my finger the way the book had said, rubbed his back. "No, no, no, please, please." Then he gasped, coughed, opened his tiny mouth and screamed. I wept, held him against my chest, and wept, like I hadn't since they'd lowered James into the ground. The baby screamed. I wept. We were both alive. That's all I knew. That's all that mattered. I cut the cord with James's hunting knife, cleaned us both as best I could. Wrapped him in the softest blanket I owned, the one my mother had made before she died. 3 generations of women in that blanket now. 2 of us breathing. "James," I whispered, "after your father, but I'll call you Jamie, my father's son, my reason to keep going." The bleeding wouldn't stop completely. I knew it wouldn't. Knew the danger of it. But I was too tired to care. Too tired to do anything but hold my son and count his breaths. 1, 2, 3. Still alive. Both of us still alive. 6 days passed. I learned his cries. Hunger. Wet. Tired. Lonely. Learned the weight of him. The smell. Learned to function on no sleep. To move through exhaustion like walking through water. My body slowly recovered. The bleeding slowed, but never quite stopped. I told myself it was normal. Maybe it was. Maybe I was dying slowly. Hard to tell the difference sometimes. Jamie was a good baby. Fussy at night, but content during the day. He had James's eyes. Even at 6 days old. I could see it. The same gray-blue that used to watch me over morning coffee. Now watching me from a face that knew nothing about the man he was named for. I talked to that face. Told him about his daddy. He built this cabin. Carved your cradle. would have loved you so much. I didn't tell him the rest. About the secrets, the lies. I didn't know about those yet. 6 days. That's how long I had with my son before the world tried to take even that away. 6 days of learning his cries, counting his breaths, wondering how we'd survive winter. Then Christmas morning came, and with it, Sheriff Dawson's fist on my door. The pounding rattled the cabin walls. Jamie had finally fallen asleep, first peace he'd had all night. The noise woke him. He screamed. I bled. And Sheriff Dawson kept pounding like the door owed him money. I was still in my nightgown, still bleeding through rags every few hours, still so tired that standing made the room tilt sideways. But I stood, wrapped a shawl around my shoulders, picked up my screaming son, opened the door. Dawson stood on my porch holding a paper. Snow fell soft behind him, peaceful as a painting. Christmas morning. Even the weather had a sense of irony. Mrs. Crawford. He didn't remove his hat, didn't wish me happy Christmas. Just thrust the paper at me. Eviction notice. I stared at him, at the paper, at his cold face. What cabin belongs to the county. Your husband had no legal claim. You got 1 hour to gather your things and vacate the premises. Jamie screamed louder. My arms shook, holding him. The cold air bit through my thin nightgown. James built this cabin. This is our home. Building ain't owning. Dawson's voice was flat. Matter of fact, like he was telling me the price of flour. He was just a ranch hand. Squatted on county land. Now he's dead, and you got no right to it. My mind couldn't make sense of it. 6 days postpartum. Christmas morning. Eviction notice. The words wouldn't connect. I just had a baby. Notice that. Dawson looked at Jamie with the same interest he'd give a chicken. Unfortunate timing. But the law's the law. You got 1 hour. 1 hour. I looked around the cabin. James's tools on the wall, his chair by the fire, the cradle he'd carved before dying. To pack a life. To get out. He smiled. Actually smiled. Small and mean and satisfied. Merry Christmas, widow. He turned to leave. Just like that. Delivered an eviction notice to a bleeding woman holding a newborn on Christmas morning and walked away like it was nothing. Like I was nothing. I stood in the doorway. Jamie screaming against my chest. Snow dusting the threshold. 1 hour. Where would I go? Who would take in a widow with a 6-day-old baby and no money? What family would open their door on Christmas? To my kind of desperate, I should have cried, should have begged, should have fallen to my knees and pleaded for mercy. That's what Dawson expected. What he wanted. The widow brought low, helpless, easy to dismiss. But I'd survived James's death. Survived giving birth alone in a snowstorm. Survived 6 days of bleeding and exhaustion and terror. I'd survived things Dawson couldn't imagine. And I would not let this tin star bully erase me on Christmas morning. I set Jamie in his cradle. Covered him with blankets to muffle the screaming. Every step across the cabin floor cost me. My body screamed to lie down, to stop, to surrender. But I walked. That's when I saw it. The thing James never showed me, never told me about. Sitting on the mantle between our wedding photograph and a dead candle. A badge. My legs barely held me. I reached up, took it down. Cold metal, heavy in my palm, silver, worn smooth in places. Engraved with words I'd never seen, Ghost Ranger Territory Justice, below the words. A number. 37. I turned it over. Found initials on the back. J.C. James Crawford, my husband's badge. My husband, who I'd thought was just a ranch hand. Just a simple man who built me a cabin and carved a cradle and died in the wrong place at the wrong time. Behind the badge, I found papers, folded thin and yellowed. I opened them with shaking hands. Commendations. Reports, records of arrests. Each one signed by my husband. Each one documenting an outlaw brought to justice. 37 arrests. 37 outlaws who'd killed, robbed, burned, and destroyed. 37 men my husband had hunted down and brought in. Some dead, some alive. All dangerous. The Ghost Ranger. I'd heard of him. Everyone had. The man who tracked outlaws through impossible terrain. Who appeared like smoke and vanished like wind. Who cleaned up the territory one killer at a time. That was James, my James. The man who'd held me gentle and kissed my forehead and talked about growing old together. He'd been hunting death every time he left our bed. I should have felt betrayed, lied to. Angry that he'd hidden this for 5 years of marriage. But standing there bleeding and exhausted with my screaming son and 1 hour to lose everything. I just felt grateful. Grateful he'd left me this proof, this power, this one last gift. I wrapped my shawl tighter, picked up the badge, walked back to the door where Dawson was smoking on my porch, watching the snowfall, waiting for me to collapse. I opened the door, held up the badge, said nothing. His face changed, went from smug to confused to something close to afraid. Where'd you get that? I still didn't speak. Just held it steady. Let the silver catch the morning light. Let the number 37 speak for itself. I didn't know. Dawson stepped back. He never said, never told anyone he was the Ghost Ranger. My voice came out cold, steady, stronger than I felt. My husband, Jamie's father. The man who made this territory safe enough for small men to wear tin stars and bully widows. Dawson's mouth opened, closed. He looked at the badge, at me, at the cabin. I didn't know. He said again, "Now you do." I lowered the badge but didn't put it away. "This cabin stays mine. You understand?" He nodded, fast and jerky like a puppet. "Yes, ma'am. I'll tell the county. Mistake. Just a mistake. Merry Christmas, Sheriff." I closed the door in his face. I stood there holding the badge. Jamie's screams had quieted to whimpers. The cabin was silent except for my breathing and the wind outside. My hands shook. Not from cold. From understanding, every goodbye had been potentially forever. Every time James had kissed me and said he was going to check the herd, he might have been riding toward a gunfight. 5 years of marriage. 5 years of morning coffee and shared sunsets, and him holding me in the dark. All of it built on half-truths. I sat in his chair, studied the badge, Ghost Ranger, territory justice. Words that meant he'd lived a life I knew nothing about. Words that meant the man I'd loved was only half the man who'd existed. I found more papers tucked behind where the badge had been. Careful records in James's neat handwriting. Dates, names, crimes. The Dalton boys' robbery and murder. Arrested June 1882. Blackjack Morrison killed a family outside Denver. Brought in dead. August 1883. On and on. 37 entries. 37 times my husband had faced evil and won. The 38th had killed him. I traced his handwriting with my finger. Tried to reconcile this James with the one I'd known. The one who'd built me this cabin log by log. Who'd carved animals into Jamie's cradle. Who'd touched my pregnant belly and whispered promises about growing old together. Had he known that last morning when he'd kissed me? Had he known he might not come back? The bank robbery hadn't been wrong place, wrong time. He'd been there hunting someone, doing his job, being the ghost ranger one last time. Why didn't you tell me? I asked the empty room, asked his chair, his boots, his ghost. Did you think I couldn't handle it? Did you think I'd leave? The silence gave no answers. Jamie cried again. I went to him, picked him up, settled into James's chair to nurse. The badge sat on the armrest, catching firelight. My son, my husband's legacy, my husband's lies. All of it tangled together, too tight to separate. Word spread through town faster than I expected. By afternoon, there were men at my door. They knocked soft this time, respectful. They removed their hats when I answered. Mumbled apologies. Didn't know about James. Ma'am, didn't know what he'd done for us. You need anything? You just ask. I nodded. Thanked them. Watched them shuffle away looking guilty. The women came too. Brought food they'd withheld for 3 weeks. Casseroles and bread and jars of preserves. They clucked over Jamie, exclaimed how big he was getting, asked if I needed help with anything. Suddenly, I was visible. Not just widow. Ranger's widow. Grief was easier to help when it came with heroism. I accepted their offerings, smiled when expected, played the part they needed me to play. But inside, I felt hollow. They respected me now because of what James had done. Not because of who I was. Not because a woman bleeding and alone with a newborn deserved basic human decency. Because my dead husband had been important. That night, after they'd all left and Jamie slept and the cabin filled with shadows. I held the badge again, felt its weight, its power. This piece of metal had saved my home, had earned me respect, had given me space to breathe, but it had also stolen 5 years of truth, had turned my marriage into something half real, had made me wonder if I'd ever truly known the man I'd loved. You saved me, I whispered to James's ghost. But you also lied to me. Both things are true. I don't know which one matters more. I put the badge back on the mantle. Not hidden this time. Displayed. Let it catch the light. Let it tell its story. Let it protect me even now. But respect from fear isn't the same as being known. I had my home, my son, my husband's honor. What I didn't have was peace. Or anyone who saw me, just me, as enough. I counted things I'd stopped counting before. Like how many times I looked at the door, expecting James to walk through. How many times I touched his empty pillow. How many times I whispered his name into the dark and got no answer. I'd been surviving on anger and stubbornness, and the badge's borrowed power. But Jamie needed more than survival. He needed a mother who could do more than just not die. He needed a life, not just existence. I didn't know how to give him that. Didn't know how to be anything other than tired and bleeding and grateful to still be breathing. But I knew I had to learn, somehow, before the exhaustion and the loneliness and the weight of James's secrets crushed me flat. 3 days after Christmas, everything changed again. Another man came to my door. But this one didn't bring eviction notices or casseroles. He brought stories. And stories. I was about to learn. Could be harder to survive than winter. Thomas Granger rode up quiet. The kind of quiet that comes from men who've learned to move carefully. He was older, maybe 50, with gray threading through dark hair and eyes that had seen too much. He dismounted slow, tied his horse, approached my porch like he wasn't sure of his welcome. Mrs. Crawford. He removed his hat. My name's Thomas Granger. I knew your husband. 5 words that opened everything I'd kept locked. I stood in the doorway, holding Jamie. 3 days since Dawson. 3 days of visitors and casseroles and forced smiles. I was tired of visitors, tired of smiling. A lot of people knew James. Not like I did. Ma'am. He gestured to the badge visible on my mantle. I trained him, worked with him on the harder cases. Came to pay my respects. Check on James's family. I should have sent him away. Should have said I didn't need checking on. But something in his tired eyes made me step back. Open the door wider. Coffee's on. We sat at my table. I poured coffee with hands that shook from exhaustion. Jamie fussed in my arms. The cabin was a mess, dishes unwashed, floor unswept. Everything bearing the weight of a woman barely surviving. If Thomas noticed, he didn't say, just sipped his coffee, made no comment about it being bitter. I'd forgotten sugar again. Seemed to forget it every time now. How long did you know him? I asked, because someone had to speak. 5 years, since he first signed on. Thomas set his cup down, careful. I was getting too old for it by then. Took a bullet in the leg that slowed me down. Needed someone younger. Faster. James was both. He never told me. The words came out harder than I meant. 5 years of marriage. 5 years of him riding out. Coming home. Lying beside me. And he never told me. He wanted to. Thomas's voice was gentle. Too gentle. Talked about it all the time. Should tell Sarah. He'd say. She deserves to know. But he was scared. Of what? That I'd leave. That you'd worry yourself sick every time he rode out. That you'd see him different. That the knowing would kill something between you. Thomas looked at me steady. He loved you more than breath. Ma'am, wanted to keep you separate from the darkness. Wanted to come home to something clean. I laughed. Bitter sound. Well, he succeeded. Came home, played the simple rancher, and I never suspected I was too stupid to see you weren't stupid. You were trusting. There's a difference. Jamie started crying. Really crying. The kind that meant hungry and wet and tired all at once. I tried to soothe him, but my arms were shaking. Everything was shaking. 3 hours of sleep in 6 days and a body still recovering from birth and a heart still trying to understand how my marriage had been a lie. Mrs. Crawford. Thomas stood. When's the last time you ate something? Something real. Not just bread. I couldn't remember. Yesterday. The day before. I'm fine. You're not. He said it flat. Factual. You're exhausted and still healing and trying to care for an infant alone. You need help. I don't need anything. The words came automatic, defensive. I have the badge. I have respect. That's enough. Respect doesn't chop wood. Ma'am, pride doesn't feed babies. He was right. I hated that he was right. The woodpile was low. The roof still leaked. I was surviving on stubbornness and the town's guilt. But survival wasn't the same as living. And Jamie deserved better than a mother running on empty. I could stay. Thomas said it careful. Testing. Few days. Chop wood. Fix what needs fixing. Make sure you and the boy are settled before I move on. Every instinct screamed to refuse. To say I could handle it. That I didn't need a stranger's charity. That accepting help was admitting I couldn't do it alone. And alone was all I had left to prove. But Jamie's cries got louder. My arms got weaker. And I was so tired. So desperately tired. 1 week, I heard myself say, Then you go? Thomas nodded. 1 week. that night. After he'd chopped enough wood to last a month and fixed the roof leak and left a stew simmering that made the cabin smell like home used to. I sat with Jamie and let myself cry. Not for James. For me. For being so tired of being strong. For needing help and hating that I needed it. For being the kind of woman who couldn't do everything alone. I'd thought I was surviving well. Thought I was managing, but Thomas saw through it in 5 minutes. Saw the exhaustion. The barely holding on. The house of cards I'd built from pride and stubbornness. It's not weakness. My mother had told me once. I was 12. Trying to carry too much firewood. Asking for help isn't weakness. It's wisdom. I hadn't understood then. Hadn't wanted to understand. But sitting there with my crying son and my aching body and my half-truth marriage, I started to see what she meant. Thomas stayed in the barn, kept his distance. But every morning there was fresh wood chopped. Every evening there was food. Every time Jamie cried, and I couldn't calm him. There were footsteps on the porch, and a soft knock, and a man's voice asking, "Can I help?" I let him. Not because I wanted to, because I had to, and every kindness felt like a knife. Because it reminded me what I'd lost, what Jamie would never have. Not charity, not respect. A father. January brought the kind of cold that kills. Snow piled 6 feet against the cabin walls. The path to the barn disappeared overnight. And Jamie developed a fever that terrified me more than Dawson ever did. He burned. Hot to the touch, limp in my arms, refusing to nurse. His tiny body shook with chills one moment and sweated the next. And all I could think was, I survived his birth. I cannot survive his death. Thomas. He came fast. Took one look at Jamie, and his face went serious. How long? Since last night. He won't eat. Won't stop crying. He's so hot. Infant fever. Thomas's voice stayed calm. Steady. I've seen it. We can treat it. But I need to get to the McAllisters. They have medicine herbs. The McAllisters are 5 miles out. In this snow, I'll make it. He was already saddling his horse. Keep him cool, not cold. Cool. Damp cloth on his forehead. Try to get him to nurse, even if he fights it. I'll be back before dark. Then he was gone. Riding into a blizzard for a baby that wasn't his. For a woman who'd told him he could only stay a week. For people he barely knew. I did what he said. Damp cloth, attempted nursing, prayers that felt hollow, because I wasn't sure God listened to women like me anymore. Jamie screamed. Weak, pitiful screams that broke something inside me every time. Please, I whispered. Please don't take him. Haven't I lost enough? Haven't I survived enough? Please. The hours dragged. Snow kept falling. The cabin grew dark. I lit candles, watched shadows dance, counted Jamie's breaths, and wondered which one would be his last. I thought about James. Wondered if he was watching from wherever the dead go. If he saw our son burning with fever and felt helpless like I did. Or if death meant peace from caring. Peace from terror. Peace from love that only brought pain. When Thomas finally came back, snow-covered and half-frozen, I nearly wept with relief. Got it. He held up a small cloth bag, willow bark and feverfew. We make a weak tea. Get him to drink it. We worked together. Thomas boiled water while I held Jamie. I spooned tiny amounts of tea into his mouth while Thomas held the cloth to his forehead. We took turns through the night, neither of us sleeping, both of us fighting death. Again, somewhere around 3 in the morning, Jamie's fever broke. He nursed, weak but willing. His skin cooled. His breathing steadied, and I held him and shook. Not from cold. From understanding, I couldn't do this alone. Wouldn't survive it, and maybe that was okay. "Thank you," I said. My voice cracked. "You saved him." Thomas didn't look at me, kept his eyes on the fire. "We saved him. You kept him going until I got back. That took strength." I was terrified. Strength isn't not being scared. It's being scared and doing what needs doing anyway. He finally looked at me. "Your husband taught me that. First week he worked with me." He was terrified, shaking so hard he could barely hold his gun. But he did the job. Every time. That's real courage. I thought about James then. Really thought about him. Not the liar. Not the hero. Just the man. The one who'd been scared and brave at the same time. Who'd loved me and lied to me, and both were true. Who'd built me a cabin and carved a cradle and hunted killers, and all of it was him. All of it was real. Did he love me? I asked. Needed to know? Or was I just the clean thing he came home to? The escape. "He loved you," Thomas's voice was certain. "Sure. More than anything. Used to talk about you all the time. How you laughed at his bad jokes. How you sang while you cooked. How you made him want to live long enough to grow old." He paused. The last thing he said before he died was your name. Something broke inside me then. Something I'd been holding tight since the funeral. Since the birth. Since the badge and the eviction and all of it. I cried. Not pretty tears. Ugly, gasping sobs that shook my whole body. Thomas didn't try to fix it. Didn't tell me to stop or that it would be okay. Just sat there, present, steady, like James used to be. When I could breathe again, I asked, did he know that last day? Did he know it might be his last? "I think so." Thomas added wood to the fire. He'd been talking about quitting. Said he wanted to be there when the baby came. Wanted to teach his son to ride, to build, to be a good man. His voice went soft. I think he took that last job knowing it was risky, knowing he should walk away. But there was a family in danger, and James never could walk away from people who needed help. That was my husband, the man who'd hunt killers, the man who'd carved a cradle, the man who died saving strangers because he couldn't do anything else. I started to forgive him then. Not for the lying, for being human, for being complicated and scared and brave and flawed, for loving me the only way he knew how. He wanted me to survive, I said. That's why he left the badge. So I'd have protection, respect, a way to stay safe. He wanted more than that. Thomas looked at me steady. He wanted you to live, to find joy again, to give Jamie a full life, not just a safe one. Through February, Thomas stayed, fixed everything broken. The fence, the roof, the barn door that had hung crooked for a year. But somewhere in the fixing, he was mending pieces of me too. Not replacing James, not making me forget, just showing me that help wasn't surrender, that accepting kindness wasn't weakness, that I could be strong and still lean. The town watched, whispered some, but Mrs. Hennessy had come by and said, what mattered. Survival isn't betrayal. Child, it's honoring what you lost by refusing to die with it. I was starting to believe her. I found Thomas building a cradle in the barn. Not repairing building. New wood. Careful joints. Tiny animals carved into the sides. "What are you doing?" My voice came out sharp. Scared? He looked up, saw my face, set down his tools. "Jamie's outgrowing the basket. Thought he could use something bigger." "You thought—" I stepped closer, felt my heart pounding. "Like you'll be here to see it. Like this is your family. Like you have the right." Thomas stood slow. Careful. Sarah. James was Jamie's father. The words came fast. Angry. Terrified. Always will be. This feels like erasing him. Like replacing him. Like he didn't matter. I'm not trying to replace anyone. "Then what are you doing?" I heard myself shouting. Couldn't stop. Fixing my house. Feeding my son. Building furniture. Acting like you belong here. You don't. You can't. I know that. Then why are you still here? Your week ended. January ended. February's almost gone. Why are you still here? Because you need help. I don't need you. The lie tasted bitter. We were fine before. We'll be fine after. You need to go. Silence. Long and heavy. Thomas just looked at me. Not angry, not hurt, just sad. "What are you afraid of?" Sarah. Hearing my name broke something. He'd called me Mrs. Crawford for weeks, but now, in this moment, he used my name, and it felt too intimate, too real, too much. Everything. The word came out small. "I'm afraid of everything. Tell me." I sank onto a hay bale, all the fight draining out of me. "I'm afraid of needing you, of Jamie needing you, of you becoming everything and then leaving. Everyone I love dies or leaves. James died. My mother died. My father left when I was 14. Everyone goes, and I can't." My voice cracked. "I can't survive losing someone again." Thomas sat beside me, not touching, just close. "I can't promise I won't die. James couldn't either. None of us can. But I can promise I won't leave. Not unless you truly want me gone." "How can you promise that? How can anyone—" "Because I know what I want. Been alone 15 years since my wife died. Thought I wanted to stay that way. Thought I was done with caring about people. Then I met a stubborn widow who survived things that would break most folks. Who kept getting up every morning, even when she didn't want to. Who loved her son fierce enough to fight sheriffs and fevers and everything in between." He finally looked at me. "I want to stay. Not because you need me. Because I want to." I couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. Couldn't do anything but sit there and feel the weight of what he was offering. Not rescue. Not charity. Choice. He was choosing me. Choosing us. And that was more terrifying than anything. I might never love you like I loved James. The truth came out raw. Honest. That's not fair to you. Love isn't rationed. It's not a pie where one slice means less of another. You can love James and still make room for something new. Something different. He stood. But I won't push. Won't stay where I'm not wanted. If you want me gone, say the word. I'll leave tonight. He walked out of the barn, left me sitting there with the half-finished cradle and the question hanging between us, like snow waiting to fall. That night, I couldn't sleep. Jamie was peaceful in his basket. The cabin was warm, but I lay awake watching shadows and wondering what kind of fool pushes away the only help she has. I thought about James, our last morning together. He'd kissed me long, held me tight, whispered against my hair, "I love you. Remember that. Whatever happens. Remember I love you." I thought he was being sentimental. Now I wondered if he'd known. If he'd sensed that ride might be his last, and if he had known, what would he want for me now? Eternal mourning, lonely survival, or permission to live? I got up, put on my shawl, walked through the snow to the barn. Thomas was packing his saddlebag by lantern light, moving slow, reluctant, but respecting my cruel words from earlier. I stood in the doorway, snow falling soft behind me, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might break through my ribs. "Stay." He turned, looked at me like he wasn't sure he'd heard right. "Please stay." My voice shook. "Not for James, not because I need you. Stay for me. Because I want you to. Because Jamie deserves someone who chooses to be here. Because I'm tired of being alone." Thomas set down the saddlebag, crossed the barn in 3 steps, stopped just close enough that I could feel his warmth. "You sure know the honest answer?" "I'm terrified, but I'm more terrified of pushing you away and spending the rest of my life wondering what I could have had if I'd been brave enough to say yes." He smiled then, small and soft and real. "That's the bravest thing I've heard all week." We stood there in the barn, with snow falling outside and the future uncertain, and everything I'd been, holding tight, finally starting to loosen. I didn't know if this was right. Didn't know if I'd regret it. Didn't know anything except that I was tired of being afraid. Tired of choosing safety over possibility. Tired of surviving when I could be living. "One condition," I said. "You finish that cradle. Jamie needs it." "Yes, ma'am." We walked back to the cabin together, not touching, not speaking, just walking through snow under stars with the whole complicated future ahead of us, and the courage finally to face it. 3 days later, Thomas and I had what my mother would have called a conversation. We sat at the table after Jamie went down for the night, coffee between us. The cradle finished and beautiful in the corner, everything feeling both settled and terrifyingly new. "I need to tell you my terms," I said. Had practiced this. Needed to say it right. "If you're staying, there are things you need to know. I'm listening. I might never love you the way I loved James. The first truth, the hardest one, that's not fair to you, but it's honest. He was my first love, my only love for a long time. You're different. This is different. I know. Jamie will know his father. The real one. All of it. The ranch hand and the ranger. The man who built this cabin and the man who hunted killers. I won't let him be forgotten." Thomas nodded. "Wouldn't ask you to. This is my cabin. James's badge. Our land. You're welcome here, but it stays ours. Jamie's inheritance. I won't sign that away. Don't want you to." I took a breath. The last one? The one that mattered most. I don't need saving. I need a partner. Someone who sees that I'm capable, but lets me lean anyway. Someone who knows the difference between helping and taking over. Can you do that? He was quiet for a moment, thinking, then I can do that. That's it? That's all you're going to say? What else should I say? You laid out what you need, what you can offer, what your boundaries are. I either agree or I don't. I agree. He sipped his coffee, made a face. Though I might start making the coffee. You forget sugar every time. I laughed. Actual laughter. First time in months. I know, I can't seem to remember it exists. I'll remember for you. And somehow, that small promise felt bigger than anything. He'd remember sugar. He'd remember I was capable. He'd remember to stay. The town noticed. Of course, Mrs. Hennessy came by with bread and wisdom. Some folks will talk, she said. Always do. But you're the ranger's widow. Hard to judge you too harshly when his honor's still protecting you. She was right. The badge still sat on my mantle, still commanded respect. Still gave me space to make my own choices without the town deciding for me. There were whispers. Too soon. Some said, disrespectful. Others understood. The other widows, especially. They'd nod when they saw me. Small gestures of solidarity. We knew what the others didn't. That survival sometimes meant making hard choices. That loving again didn't mean loving less. March came. The snow melted. Thomas and I planted a garden together. Not his garden, not mine, ours. We worked in companionable silence, him showing me how to space the seeds, me teaching him which herbs I liked for cooking. Jamie grew fat and happy, started smiling at Thomas, reaching for him. The first time he did, I felt my heart clench, not with jealousy, with gratitude. My son would know kindness, would know a man who chose to stay, would know that family wasn't just blood, but commitment. Thomas finished the cradle one evening while I cooked, brought it inside, set it by the window. Come see. I wiped my hands, walked over, looked at the carvings he'd made. A horse for James's ranch work, a star for the ranger badge, and a flower. What's the flower? I asked. You. He traced it with his finger. Because you bloom in harsh soil. Because you're beautiful, even in hard seasons. Because Jamie should know his mother was strong enough to survive winter and brave enough to choose spring. I couldn't speak, just looked at this man who'd carved my story into wood, who'd seen me at my worst and stayed anyway, who understood that I was both widow and woman, both grieving and growing, both holding on and letting go. That night, Jamie slept in his new cradle. I slept deeper than I had in months. And I dreamed not of James dying, but of Jamie growing, of gardens blooming, of mornings with coffee that actually had sugar in it. I chose Thomas. But really, I chose me, chose living over surviving, chose hope over safety, chose to believe that a heart can love more than once different, but real, changed but whole. James gave me the badge. Thomas gave me tomorrow. I gave myself permission to take both. When I woke the next morning, Thomas was already up, making coffee. The smell filled the cabin. Sweet and rich. He'd remembered the sugar. I sat at the table, watched him move through my kitchen like he belonged there. And maybe he did. Maybe belonging wasn't about blood or history. Maybe it was about showing up, staying, choosing each other every morning. Thank you, I said, for the coffee, for staying, for seeing me. For everything, he just smiled, set a cup in front of me, kissed the top of my head like it was the most natural thing in the world. And it was natural. Right. The beginning of something I'd been too scared to imagine, but brave enough to choose. I was James's widow. Thomas's partner, Jamie's mother, my own woman, all of it true. None of it contradictory, all of it me. 2 years have passed since that Christmas morning. Jamie walks now, talks, calls Thomas Papa Tom, and points to the badge on the mantle when I tell him about his daddy James. He'll know both men, both legacies. That's my gift to him. The cabin's bigger now. Thomas added a room last spring, proper bedroom for us, so Jamie can have his own space when he's older. My writing desk sits by the window where I record our story. Not for publication, for Jamie. So he'll know where he came from, who he comes from, the widow who survived, and the men who shaped her survival. It's not a shrine to James anymore. It's a home for the living. Morning coffee for 3. Thomas never forgets the sugar. He reads while Jamie plays with the wooden horses he's carved. I write, or mend, or plan the garden. We built ordinary. It's extraordinary. I learned something these 2 years. Something I couldn't have understood in the grief and the bleeding and the terror of that first winter. Surviving and living are different things. James taught me to survive through his badge, his honor, his love. Thomas taught me to live through patience, partnership, presence. I taught myself that both matter, that I could hold grief and joy in the same heart. The badge still sits on the mantle. But I don't see it as James's secret anymore. I see it as his protection. Even dead, he made sure I'd be respected, taken seriously, given space to grieve and grow. Some men save you once. James saved me twice alive and dead. This morning, I walked to James's grave. First time in months. Told him about Jamie's new words, about the garden blooming, about Thomas's gentle way with our son. I'm happy, I said to the stone, to the ground, to whatever remained of the man I'd loved. I hope that's okay. The wind moved through the grass. I took it as answer. They ask me sometimes. In town, how I survived, Christmas eviction, childbirth alone. Widow at 23 with a newborn and no money. I tell them about the badge. But the real answer is simpler. I survived because I had to. I lived because I chose to. And every woman who's ever lost everything and built again knows the difference. The West is hard on women. Harder on widows, hardest on mothers alone. But here's what I know. Now a woman can be broken and mended in the same lifetime. Can love more than once without betraying the first. Can carry grief and hope in the same worn hands. You don't dishonor the dead by choosing to live. You honor them by refusing to die with them. I am James's widow. That will never change. But I'm also Thomas's partner, Jamie's mother, my own woman with my own story and my own choices. All of it fits together. All of it is true. Last week, Jamie brought me a flower from the garden, handed it to me with his sticky toddler fingers and said, "Pretty, Mama." I thought about the flower Thomas carved into the cradle, about blooming in harsh soil, about beauty in hard seasons, about how far I'd come from that Christmas morning when I thought I'd lose everything. "Yes, baby," I said. "Very pretty." Thomas looked up from his book, smiled at me. Not the big romantic smiles from stories. Just a quiet knowing. The kind that comes from partnership and commitment and showing up every day, even when it's hard. This is what I've built. Not perfect. Not what I imagined when I married James at 20 and thought I knew what forever looked like. But real, true. Mine. The badge catches morning light. Jamie's laughter fills the cabin. Thomas's coffee sits steaming on the table, sweet with sugar. And I understand. Finally. What James wanted me to know. Love doesn't end, it transforms. The strongest legacy isn't protection, it's permission. Permission to survive. And permission, finally, to live.